going on, everybody? Welcome to the latest episode of our podcast, Mass Media Hysteria. It is July 18th, although this will be going up on the 19th on my channel. My name is Court. I will be your host for the duration. With me, as always, is Chris.
How's it going, everybody?
And making his triumphant return after a 14-month hiatus, the prodigal son, Andris, is here.
14 months went by pretty quick, didn't they?
Right? So as per usual, we want to thank you guys for tuning in, as though tuning in is a thing. We want to let you know, of course, that you can always, if you don't have time to watch a long ass YouTube video, you can get audio only versions of this podcast on places like Google Podcasts and Spotify. So check that out if you're into that. We also want to encourage you, if you like the video, give it a little thumbs up, share it around. It helps the video get out to more people, helps the podcast grow, helps the channel grow. We appreciate it very much. And of course, we want to also encourage you to comment in the comments below with any of your thoughts on any of the topics we're going to be talking about today. I do read all of the comments. I respond to as many of them as I can. So don't think any of your stuff is being gone unread. That's not really a quality sentence, but here we are. Today we have 3 topics for you. They're all going to be reviews. They're all going to be spoilers. So first, we're going to be talking about the latest Netflix sort of action movie, Gunpowder Milkshake. Then Chris and I are going to go into our review of the finale of Loki, episode 6 for all time, always. Andris has not watched the show, so he's just going to hang out. And then finally, at the end of the video, we'll be doing a full spoilers review of, also from Netflix, Fear Street Part 3, 1666. So before we jump in, do you guys have anything you want to say, or?
No, I'm ready.
Good to go?
Let's
do this. All right. So, you know what? Do you guys, I'm forgetting the name of the director of Gunpowder Milkshake. Do either of you have it on hand?
Yes, I do.
Something.
It is, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, but it is Navat Papuchado.
Okay.
Poopy Shadow, yes.
Nice. So this film stars Karen Gillan, who I'm a big fan of. Karen Gillan is, this is kind of in the realm of like a John Wick, an Atomic Blonde. I might say it's not as good as those, but it's Karen Gillan doing a bunch of ass kicking. We also have Lena Headey from Game of Thrones. We've got Carla Gugino, Angela Bassett, Michelle Yeoh, and the always wonderful Paul Giamatti. Before we sort of go into the beats of the movie, and we won't go through every single beat of the movie because we'd be here all day, but Andris, you're back. Let me throw it to you first. What were your sort of overall thoughts of this movie?
I did not like it.
Okay. What about you, Chris?
Gunpowder Milkshake, more like Gunpowder, not a very good movie.
Okay.
Got it. I was gonna, by the way, on my Instagram, I put Gunpowder Milkshake, like MEH.
Gotcha.
Because it's a quality pun. I just didn't think that would have worked as well in audio format.
Works better in text, yeah, for
exactly,
sure.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that I didn't think this was a very good film, but I had a lot of fun watching it, which is something. So I guess let's get into it. I mentioned the cast off the top of my head. I'm a big fan of Karen Gillan. I have been for quite some time. She was in a film last year, maybe even 2 years ago, that I believe was written by Dave DeSmalchin, who also starred in it, called All Creatures Here Below. Have either of you guys seen that one?
I haven't, no.
She's really good in that movie. It's very weird. It's got a bit of a what's it called? Oh, Lenny and George of Mice and Men. It's got a bit of a Mice and Men thing going on. Good movie. She's really good at it. This film is, like I said, it's very much an action movie. It's very, very stylized to the point where I thought, just from the color palette alone and the way it was shot, I was convinced it was based on a graphic novel, but from what I can tell, it was not.
Yeah, the whole thing feels very comic booky from start to finish.
It's got, even though it's more colorful, it's got almost like a Sin City kind of flavor to it. Not as dark in tone and material, but just in the look. But basically, the film opens with we see Karen Gillan's character, I believe his name is Sam, as a younger girl, a teenager, meeting up with her mother, played by Lena Headey, at this diner. And you know, I mentioned John Wick, and this movie has some similarities to John Wick in that, you know, in John Wick, there was the hotel where all the assassins would go, and you're not allowed to fight each other there. Well, here it's a diner, and you're not allowed to bring in weapons and what have you. And she has this sort of sit down with her mother. It's obviously kind of a frosty relationship. And then the mother's going to get attacked, and there's a fight, and then she like disappears for many years of Sam's life. And we flash forward. Sam's now played by Karen Gillan, and she's working for this group of dudes called like the Syndicate or something like that.
The firm.
The firm, thank you. And it's not run by Paul Giamatti, but he's sort of her boss. He's sort of her contact. He's also, in a weird way, a little bit like her, not caretaker, but like sort of her mom put Sam into the
guardian.
Yeah. Kind of
Mhm.
looks out for her and whatever.
Yeah.
Or is supposed to be established as such, but like,
Right. they went pretty light on that.
Yeah.
But basically she's given a job. She has to go, this guy has stolen some money from the mob or what have you. She has to go either kill this guy or get the money back, whatever. Push comes to shove, she ends up shooting him in the stomach. He's slowly sort of bleeding out, and he mentions that the mob has his daughter, his, I don't know, 8 or 9-year-old daughter.
Eight
okay.
and 3/4.
That's right. How could I
You remember?
forget?
She's so precocious. She has to remind you.
It's true. How could I possibly forget?
Mhm.
And so basically throughout the course of this movie, she gets the kid back and has to like take care of this kid while the mob is coming after them because the money got destroyed in an explosion, I believe it was. So that's sort of your basic setup. And then of course, she goes to this library where we meet Carla Gugino, who is the librarian. This is also like a front. It's basically an armory for people like Sam. We also meet Angela Bassett and Michelle Yeoh, who are other librarians. And we definitely get this. It's definitely hinted that they have some badassery, as I like to say it, in their past. They arm her up, and violence ensues. So let me ask you guys this. Let's talk about the cast a little bit first. How did you guys feel about Karen Gillan in particular, Chris?
So as you mentioned, this entire cast is made up of really, really terrific actresses that have done really great things prior. No one really in this kind of stood out to me. Everyone, and that has a lot more to do with the writing and direction. I don't think that anybody gave a poor performance. I think it was just the material they were given and the direction they were given kind of made it so that nobody shone or shone. Yeah. So Karen Gillan in particular, I'm not in particular, but in addition, I've liked her for a while. I first saw her in one of those seasons of Doctor Who. I love her character there. I know Andris is not a fan of those revivals, but I was a big fan. And yeah, but I was happy to kind of see her trajectory in Hollywood since. And in here, she's fine. She kind of plays stoic badass lady. There's a bit of moments of her kind of given something to do, like having a little bit of emotional beats, and she can crank out the tears, and so she's solid and she's reliable. Same with everyone else. They're mostly solid and reliable, but nobody's really standing out to me.
Andris?
That sounds about right. Yeah, I'm in full agreement. Nobody really stood out. They worked with what they were given, and they weren't really given much.
Right. Yeah, I'm kind of the mind that I liked everyone in the movie. Nobody blew me away. The only person who I straight up didn't like in this film, and this feels sacrilegious to me to say, I didn't like Angela Bassett in this movie at all. And I love Angela Bassett, but I think it was particular how her character in particular was written. And she was just like, to me, she was really overcooking it. Just really chewing the scenery to the point where it felt, even though this movie is very like heightened anyway, it still felt too much to me. And it really kind of put me off a little bit.
It seemed like she was doing Zoolander's blue steel face through the entire film.
Totally.
And so it was just like, okay.
There's a lot of posing for sure.
Yeah.
Not to be.
Oh, go ahead.
No, please. I was going to make a stupid joke.
I was just gonna say out of the three of them, because they're essentially the kind of the fairy godmothers. They have the same coloring as well, which is like green, pink, and blue as the fairy godmothers. And they, I suppose Carla Gugino is more of the timid one. Michelle Yeoh's kind of the straight man, and then Angela Bassett comes in, and the direction was just like, you're alpha lady, you're the boss, and you got the biggest attitude. And so she went with it, and I think that's why she kind of stood out maybe more as like, this is more corny. But again, I don't really fully blame her, because like when you're given lines of like, what the fudge are you doing in here,
Right.
and that's not me censoring myself, that's a line that they repeat a bunch of times because they thought it was hilarious. So I don't blame her. I agree that like that one kind of stood out as like extra corny, but I think again it was just because of poor direction.
Yeah.
And I want to touch on that, but I'll throw this out there quickly for anyone who's a fan of Paul Giamatti. Don't get excited, barely in the movie.
Yeah.
But I think one of the biggest problems with this film was the dialogue. Like it was bad. It was first draft. And again, this movie is kind of heightened, and it had that kind of silliness that I did appreciate about it, but it felt like they erred too far on that side with the screenplay, to the point where there were many moments where I was just taken out like, really? That was the line you went with?
Yeah.
So I don't know too much about this writer director, but it really came across as though English wasn't his first language. And I'm not saying that like what I mean by that is that like it seems like this is someone who English isn't their first language. They wrote this draft in their first language and then just translated it because it was like, oh, this is funny, and it's like it doesn't quite translate. It just everything that was trying to be meant to be funny wasn't. Like it really was just cringy. Like I don't think I laughed at any of the jokes, and there's a lot of jokes in it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I sent it to you guys in the chat, but a lot of times throughout the film I was just thinking I could see this being getting a really big cult following, because it is weird and it has its own kind of thing. It's definitely an amalgam of many things you've seen before. Kill Bill, John Wick, just Atomic Blonde, whatever. It's a bunch of things. But it just got too goofy for me. Like, something that sticks out in my mind is this hospital battle between three goons that are on laughing gas, that they're injured, and then she has like her arms paralyzed. And on one hand, it's like that's kind of a inventive way to have an action scene, but at the same time it's so cartoony. Yeah. And it's like I don't know what the tone is here, and it's not really working for me.
I would go even farther and say I don't understand the universe this is taking place in, because they're like, you can't tell what year it is. They've got cell phones, they've got cars from the 60s, they're like flip phones, but then also like you clearly see she has a TV from today. And without any mythos explanation, it's hard to ground yourself and understand what's happening. And that's one of the biggest problems this film has, because you're like, okay, who is the firm? Who is the library? What are these rules? What is this world? Because clearly guns are commonplace in this universe.
Yeah.
But we don't know why. We don't know what year it is. And that really hurts the film because you can't connect with it. And as you said, it's weird. It's a really weird film where you can't understand the tone.
Well, and to your point, Chris, that scene in the hospital, and of course we're spoiling everything. So basically these Paul Giamatti has sent his three goons, or was it Paul Giamatti, or was it? Yeah, it was Paul Giamatti.
Yeah, it was Paul Giamatti.
He sent these three goons to get her. She's taken the guy she shot in the stomach to the hospital. She goes back to check on him. But then they pay off the doctor, and he injects her with something that paralyzes both of her arms. And there's a fight scene in this hallway in the hospital. And I was so mixed on this scene, because for me, and this is true of a lot of the movie, I loved the action in this movie. I thought it was great. It wasn't John Wick level. It wasn't Atomic Blonde level, but it was really good. And it was also really inventive. Yeah. And in this scene, so her arms are paralyzed. And so she has the kid tape a gun in one hand and a knife in the other hand. And so she's fighting these guys, but because her arms are paralyzed, she's basically like throwing her body and using like momentum and centrifugal force to aim the gun and use the knife. I thought that was super cool. However, if her arms were paralyzed, how is she using her finger to pull the trigger?
Yeah, that's
Makes no sense.
As soon as she was the little girl was taping the gun to her hand, I was like, how can she move her finger? Doesn't matter. This is comic book land, and everything, because it really took, that I think we've all seen John Wick here, but they took that element of okay. In John Wick, it's comic booky in the extent that it's not just that John Wick is like an assassin, but it comes from this pulpy kind of mythology of there's like leagues of assassins, and they're really like high profile underground people, and they go to this hotel, and the hotel is basically just an undercover front for all of these assassins. And the movie took that idea and just injected that into everything, where it's like you mentioned, Andris, like it doesn't take place in any, they don't say what city it is, it's just kind of any city. They don't say what time period it is, it's just vaguely modern.
It was shot in Berlin. I had to look that up because I was trying to figure it out. But
but it's very clear that like they weren't trying to make it any sort of city, and everything everything was just kind of goofy. Like instead of just having the hotel like John Wick did, it was like everything was like a cover and a front for these assassins, like the diner, and then there was this bowling alley, and then there was this hospital that was like a dentist office, but it was I don't know. It just felt weird.
Yeah, because you had to put your gun in the cookie jar and right.
Yeah.
Well, so like the whole like paralyzed arm but can still pull the trigger. There were a lot of things like that in this movie where it was just like it doesn't make sense. For me, I was having enough fun that I was like, I don't care. That was a cool inventive fight scene. But as you said though, Chris, like those three goons, they were playing them for laughs. I didn't laugh once. It was making me cringe.
Yeah.
And it's actually kind of funny because as I was watching it, I started thinking of them as the Three Stooges. Mm-hmm. And at least the movie was self-aware enough that Sam actually refers to them as the Three Stooges a couple minutes later. So that was good.
Yeah.
But as to the action, there's a scene in a bowling alley where she's fighting guys with like knives and guns, and she's using a suitcase as her one weapon. I thought that was awesome too, particularly when the guy gets her down on the ground. The suitcase is a little bit away and he goes to stab her in the face, but she pulls out like the retractable handle and uses that to block it. I was like, that was cool.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Very inventive. Which is sad because it's got this inventiveness in this film happening. You're like, oh
yeah.
This is a bit of a nitpick, but I actually went back and just rewatched. It was the beginning of that fight scene in the bowling alley. It does not look good. They try to do it's if seriously just go back and just rewatch it and tell me I'm wrong in that they were trying to do this one shot take John Wick style of her taking on all three of them, but they messed up everything. Like they really like the choreography is very bad in that there are times when two guys are just like they have weapons and they're just looking at her.
Yeah.
Waiting for their next move when it's like you could take her out. So that's like, so there was, when you have these big multiple people fighting each other scenes, it needs to be done in a way where it makes it seem believable enough that like, okay, you incapacitated one person so you can focus on another person. That gives the excuse of why they're not just ganging up on you and kicking your ass. But they didn't do that. It was literally like them politely waiting for her to dispatch of one guy. Not only that, but it just seemed that Karen Gillan isn't good at this choreography because in every kind of martial arts film, they do speed ramping with the editing, but they do it in a good way of not the whole footage is not just sped up. It's certain moments of like when they start a punch to when they punch, they speed it up to make it look faster. They remove frames from when people get hit, so it looks like their head gets like cracked back farther. But they didn't do that. It felt like the whole thing was sped up, and they didn't do any like really kind of like edit, like they didn't remove frames. So again, I rewatched it and I was like, this is just really awkward. It really looks like a Benny Hill skit of someone that doesn't know the choreography, because Karen Gillan's clearly not punching these people. They're clearly not going after her when they could, and it's embarrassing. But what I will say, that's the rest of the action didn't give me that vibe. I did appreciate the inventiveness of kind of like the Jackie Chan style action of using props and using the environment. And I think that when they started editing and they weren't trying to rely on like the single take John Wick style of filming action, I think I was like, okay, that worked. Like, you know, she gets a bowling ball and she hits them, and you know, like you mentioned, the hospital where she was kind of swinging her arms. There was a lot of inventiveness there, but I felt that one moment just stood out to me, and I had to bring it up.
Okay. I also did notice that I think a lot of it, and I don't know if Karen Gillan's just not good at this or if she didn't have time to train, but you could tell in a lot of the fight scenes it was not her. Not that I look at him like that's clearly a 400-pound man, but just that, like, in a lot of the shots of the fighting, she's not facing the camera, or it's very dimly lit, or you know, it's clearly not her, which is a shame, because I don't know, she did the fight dancing in Jumanji, and that was pretty good, right? But
yeah, I don't know. I agree. I think you could tell when they switched to the stunt woman.
So let me ask you guys this, because the film sort of all comes to a head where she reconnects with her mom, Lena Headey, who's not in the movie as much as I would have liked, because I think she's awesome, but I think she was good in the film. She was fun. But they reconnect, the kids there, and they all go back to the library, and they're having a sort of head-to-head with the three librarians, and they know the mob is coming and there's going to be this huge fight scene. And originally Karen Gillan's character Sam is going to take them on alone, but of course, because it was set up that, you know, we know that Lena Headey's character is a badass in this movie, but we also, it's been hinted at that these three librarians are at least former badasses. We get to see Michelle Yeoh, Angela Bassett, and Carla Gugino all kicking ass. And I got to say, that brought me like an absurd amount of joy, particularly Michelle Yeoh, because she's so stoic in this movie and quiet and reserved. And then she's just like choking a guy out with a chain and dragging him up on the thing. Like, and Carla Gugino, who's also like super timid in this movie, she's on like a Gatling gun, just mowing people down.
Hell yeah.
I loved that shit. How did you guys feel about it?
Yes.
Yeah, I liked it. I don't know. I was never blown away by any of the action here. And it's not bad, besides that like long rant I went about one segment. I didn't think the action was bad. And even in the library, there was some inventiveness that was going on with some of the kills and how it happened. Although I did laugh, and I was also kind of similar to the hospital, where it's like, how can she pull her finger? I kept noticing that again, these guys that showed up together at the same time in a bus, they showed them together at once. They all arrived at the same time, but they just decided to come into the library like one or two at a time. Right. Like one came, she took him out, then two came, she took him out, then three came. And it's like, why not just come in at once? What is happening? Anyway, I don't know. Again, it's one of those things where it's like this guy had a bunch of action figures and he set them up in cool poses, but then didn't do much with them. So it's like, isn't it cool that Michelle Yeoh and Carla Gugino and Angela Bassett had guns? I guess, but the action wasn't good enough to really make me remember it or recommend it.
Okay.
I kept thinking, so this library, is this library available to the public? Because anybody, you know, seeking to get a copy of Jane Eyre is going to be very disappointed with what they get.
It's true.
And that's what I kept watching, because like, as like Karen Gillan's pulling guns and knives and gold bars out of these books, I'm like, wait, who's watching these books in day-to-day operations? What is this library? What's going on here? Because, you know,
you're exactly right. And it doesn't make sense, because I'm sure you guys noticed how like scarily underpopulated this world is. Yeah. It's literally just the main characters and then the assassin goons. There's nobody else. And so when she goes into this library and everybody's just talking in code the entire time, even after they had just had a massive shootout, they're still talking in this code. I'm like, who is there? Who's listening? Yeah. Why can't you just be like, here's a fucking gun? Because clearly everyone in this world is an assassin.
Yeah.
It's the whole Batman, like So that's what that feels like.
Exactly.
But
Yeah,
why? Why? There's no
Why
one
would
here.
There's nobody there. Just say it. Just talk.
Because if you rewind back a bit earlier, when she first goes to the library to get those guns and they take her to the back and they're like testing her or whatever to figure out if she's worthy of their weapons, they're still talking in code. It's like, why are you just give her, why are you giving her, where are these books going?
Yeah.
Like, you're giving her these books with the guns in it. Why? You're in the back room. Who cares?
Yeah, and who what? Like if they showed someone like in the front that was just like actually browsing for a book, like there was
Yeah.
normal people maybe, but even then you're right, Andres, is that during the shootout, Karen Gillan was just grabbing books off the shelf, not even in the back room. So if it is open to the public, then is like a little girl just gonna like open up a book and like, holy fuck, it's just like a handgun. What?
Yeah. Exactly.
So one more nitpick, and then I do want to ask Andres about things that you might have liked, because I feel like we're ragging on it. So this is a tiny nitpick, but in the back room earlier in the film, when Michelle Yeoh and them are giving her the books, and it's like a gun and this and that, and then at the end, Carla Gugino's like, and here's Agatha Christie. I should explain that when she was handing the guns and stuff, they were all in books that were written by kind of famous female authors. So like, here's Sense and Sensibility, or here's Jane Eyre, stuff like that.
And it's like that thing from Shawshank Redemption where like the pages are carved out so a gun can fit in them.
Yeah, exactly. And then, but they're all like, again, they're all from like popular female authors. And then Carla Gugino gives her Agatha Christie, who is, as far as I'm concerned, only ever associated with murder mysteries, just with mysteries. And so when she gave her that book, I was like, well, that is clearly intentional. Is there going to be a mystery in this movie? No. It just felt weird. It would have been the same way of like, oh, and here's Stephen King for some reading. It's like, why? And then nothing happens. And then nothing's scary happens. There's no bullies. It's not set in Maine. There's no alcoholics.
There's no writers.
There's no writers. So it's like, why even bring it up? I don't like, again, that's a nitpick,
supernatural entities.
Exactly.
Yeah, no. I thought the same thing. As soon as she handed her that book, I was like, okay, that's foreshadowing. Nope. I think they even make a joke. She goes like, it's just a good book. But still, it was just another joke that just kind of fell flat. And
I do want to bring something up. I don't want to cut you off from your question about if I liked anything, Chris, but I wanted to point out one other thing though. Earlier on, the girl gets kidnapped so her dad can bring the money to these robbers who just stop existing. Like I felt like they were establishing that they were going to be a third power of some kind, a third character. And it was just men in monster masks shooting each other. The car blew up.
Yeah.
The end. Like, why? That was.
You're right. They were just random dudes in Universal Hollywood, like classic monsters.
I mean, because after that scene, it's all Paul Giamatti's guys coming after her, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, and they looked cool.
Yeah.
But they're good masks.
Yeah.
That's another thing, and I know I'll add on to it, but I completely agree, and I think that kind of fits into the few things that I liked about it. But I want to hear what other things you guys liked about the movie, if any.
Andres, you go first.
The cinematography was nice.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I got. I'm sorry.
No, I did think the movie had some really cool shots, and one in specific that I'll touch on in a second. But I really liked, as I sort of mentioned off the top, I really liked the color palette of this movie.
Yeah.
I've never actually seen Sucker Punch, but I almost got a bit of a Sucker Punch vibe from just visually, along with like a little bit of Sin City. There's a shot right at the very end of the movie. There's a big, huge gunfight in the diner. Basically.
It was the Zack Snyder scene.
Oh, totally.
Oh, that's what it was.
Slow-mo.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like the bad guys have got the little kid. Karen Gillan says, okay, I'm going to go in and turn myself over to the big bad guy. And then it was this weird thing. Like there's a sort of running gag throughout the movie where her mom, Lena Headey, like always has a plan, except when they need one. She's like, do you have a plan? She's like, sorry, I don't have one right now. She's like, but it's you. And at the end of the movie, the mom is saying, if you go in there, it's suicide. She's like, well, do you have a plan? She's like, no. But then it's revealed that she had a plan, and they're all there. The three librarians, the mom. but they all have guns. So how did they get in with the guns? But the bad guys couldn't get in with the guns. It was another one of those moments that didn't make sense. And they telegraphed it so hard because like there is this server at the diner who's always giving Sam extra scoops of ice cream in her milkshake. Obviously, they have a history, but Sam is having this tete-a-tete with the big bad guy, and we see the server walk into frame, but it's purposely like back to the camera. We don't see the face.
Yeah.
And they're saying, you know, can I get you more coffee? And the guy's like, if you keep asking me questions, you know, there's going to be hell to pay or whatever. And it was so obviously telegraphed that it was Lena Headey's character, even though she was like doing an American accent. But it's like, you've been showing us this server the whole movie. Why are you playing it coy now with back to the camera, like over the shoulder? Obviously, this is either Lena Headey or one of the, you know, librarians.
Yeah.
Then we get the reveal. They're all there. They're all strapped to the nines, or strapped with nines, I guess. And they just start just wrecking fools. But there is this shot from kind of like behind the bar that's slowly like tracking from one end of the diner to the other side, all in like super operatic tableau slow-mo, very Zack Snyder. I really liked that shot. I thought it looked cool. I thought the way like the blood squibs were coming out in the slow-mo looked really neat, even though I'm pretty sure they were like CGI. What did you guys think of about that scene and that shot in particular?
It was the Zack Snyder scene that they needed to have in it. I'm surprised they didn't use that in the trailer, because that was totally a trailer shot.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I guess they wanted to keep that very, very surprising reveal for the movie though.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Very surprising.
Very surprising.
So surprising. I was floored.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It was cool. It was two things I noticed were that for some reason, every single one of those goons had a short-ranged weapon. None of them had a gun. Again, I also kind of like skimmed through. I'm like, did I miss it? No, they all went to this meeting with this really deadly assassin that they want to hurt. And none of them brought guns, even though they've always had guns before, just so that it would make it a little easier for the three heroines to kind of kill everybody.
Well, and I mean, there is a story explanation for that, in that you're not allowed to bring guns into the diner. But two things: how did the women get the guns into the diner? And two, if you can't bring guns into the diner, why have the meeting at the diner?
Yeah, it's
meet me in the park. You know, like.
Yeah.
That made no sense to me. I still liked the scene. It was fun, but it made no sense.
It was cool.
There was one other thing I did want to point out. It's weird how nobody knew how to duck and nobody knew how to fire guns properly. I want to go a little bit back. This is overall though. Like when they're in the library, for example, and Mr. Man chewing on the matches is trying to shoot the librarian with the minigun. He's just like putting his hand over and he's just shooting blindly. And you're like, well, aim, stupid. Like, and like people are getting shot and hit. You're like, well, yeah, you didn't duck and cover.
Right.
Like nobody's like making sure. It's like everybody feels like they're bulletproof in this film, and then they're clearly not. It was really weird. But that was that.
Chris, did you have any other positives you wanted to share?
Yeah. Just to kind of wrap it up, like, because I've been going hard on this film, but I did think that visually it was pretty impressive. I liked the cinematography. It did look very kind of everything was very stylized, everything. And it was very much kind of candy coated. I liked the lighting. It was a lot of neon lights. Like even when they're in the diner, there was like some cool, like, you know, purple neons that were reflecting. I thought the production design was quite good wherever they went to. Like the diner was clearly a set, and I really enjoyed that. The bowling alley, that cool kind of LED backlit was really interesting. The library looked cool, like when they went to the side rooms. So everything visually, it looked good. There was some good camera movements and everything. It didn't feel boring or lifeless. Like it had a lot of energy. But it was just kind of in service of okay action that went from like, it was inventive and fun at times, but also just kind of not great at times, not like terrible. But yeah, that's pretty much the biggest praise, that visually it was interesting. And it gave me enough goodwill that I was kind of riding with it for about halfway. But then afterwards, I just kind of stopped caring. I think it got to the point, it was a little bit more than halfway, but when that little girl that she rescued and kind of bonded with, we didn't really talk much, but she talk about much, but she bonded with this little girl, kind of like she had like 2 scenes with her where like in the hospital, and then they have like that kind of a cool car chase in a parking lot. I like that, where again the kid was driving for her, which was pretty inventive. But
yeah.
they get to this library, and like they were like,
Can I just interject for a second? I had subtitles on when I was watching it on Netflix.
I
And,
saw that.
this drove me crazy. But in that scene, so the kid is like sitting on her lap because she's still paralyzed. So Sam is doing like the brakes and the gas, and the kid's steering and shifting. But she's like, you get to have all the fun. You get to do the gas and the braking. And they spelled braking with an EA. I was like, come on, Netflix. Get it together.
God, get it together, Netflix. 0 stars.
It's like a Fatboy Slim record on the floor.
Yeah. But yeah, essentially I was just going to say that they were trying to go for a big emotional moment in the library of like, I need to go and you need to go away. And the little girl's like, but wait, I love you. And she starts crying and she's like, I'm going to be your apprentice. I'm like, when did this happen?
Yeah.
You've known her for 20 minutes. You had 2 scenes. Both of them were just like you trying to survive. I felt no connection between you two. And that to me felt indicative of a lot of the movie, where it's like it's trying things, but it's just not quite reaching it. It did try to have kind of this familial theme and emotions, but didn't quite work. Had a lot of comedy, didn't quite work. Had a lot of action, didn't quite work. It's very middling for me. I don't think this is terrible by any means. There's enough creativity behind some of the action scenes and the visuals that it's certainly not like a waste of time necessarily, but it's maybe, but it's certainly not a, how do I say it? Maybe that's not the right way to say it. It's certainly not like just a, like, people gave a shit about it. People were like trying. It just didn't quite come together for me.
Yes, I agree. I didn't hate it. It did try, but they missed the mark.
Yarp. Yeah.
Well, I will say that I did actually like the chemistry between Karen Gillan and I believe the actress's name, the kid, is Chloe Coleman. I liked their chemistry together. I just felt that relationship, as far as the story, was not earned at all.
Yeah. I mean, if I were an 8-year-old kid and some assassin shot my dad and like I realized this is a hit person, I wouldn't be like, train me to be your apprentice. I'd be like, get me to a fucking police station, please.
Yeah.
Because this person is killing people in front of me, left and right.
And I am a child.
I am a child of 8 3/4.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so for me, I would say I do recommend it. It's a hesitant recommendation. Know what you're getting into. Definitely leave your brain at the door. In fact, if you can get a partial lobotomy before you watch this movie, I would recommend doing that. But
get wasted.
That would be fun. No, I think there's enough fun to be had, and there's enough cool action that it's worth the time to take. Don't expect anything life-changing at all. Chris, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, if you're really just jonesing for an action film that's modern, I know like that's a criteria for a lot of people. They just kind of want like, what's the newest movie out? The newest fucking thing that's out. I don't care that there's a million other older action movies that are better. What's the newest thing? That's what you're craving? Sure, check it out. It's a fun action film. I've known some people that outside of this group that have liked it a lot more than me. So if you're kind of into that genre, you could probably get a kick out of it. If you're kind of like me in the sense where you're like, I've seen a lot of action movies and I like them, but I'm not craving just the newest, flashiest thing, you could probably give it a miss.
Andris?
You're probably going to forget about it 2 weeks after you see it.
I can agree with that.
I'm giving it a shrug, like, okay.
Okay.
I didn't hate it.
That's good. Okay, so we're going to move on. Chris and I are going to talk about the finale of, well, not the finale, the season finale, as we now know. Excuse me, of Loki. The episode was called For All Time, Always, which of course is the sort of slogan of the TVA. This was the 6th episode. There was a sort of, I don't even want to call it like a post-credit scene, because it's not really a scene, but we see someone like stamp a dossier with a rubber stamp, which reads that Loki will return in season 2. So a lot of people had speculated that this would be an ongoing series. Now we know that for a fact. Excuse me. Before we get into again the specifics, and once again we won't go through every beat, but Chris, you and I have both been enjoying this show quite a bit. I think we both found that, if I remember correctly, we both found that both WandaVision and Falcon and Winter Soldier didn't quite stick the landing. We both were kind of, as I recall, a little bit underwhelmed by their finales. How did you feel about this season finale overall? Did you feel like it stuck the landing? Did you enjoy it?
I did. I thought that this was a really good season finale, with some caveats which I can get into. But I thought that it, unlike the other ones where it felt like they just kind of were like rushing to a conclusion, and WandaVision in particular just kind of introduced this bombastic kind of action scene element that was really incongruent with the rest of the series.
Totally.
The ending of the ending of Loki was primarily a conversation, was primarily just dialogue, which I really appreciated. There's a bit of like a fight, but it's not really focused on it. And it was all about character. It was all about setting things up. So yeah, I think that it was satisfying, but it was satisfying in the way that it was satisfying in the way that it was opening the door for what the MCU's Phase 4 is going to be. And that was very intriguing to me. It was really just kind of them putting their cards on the deck of like, this is what's in store. I could see that being kind of anticlimactic for a lot of people. But then for me, I found it to be like, this really interesting, really exciting for what the future holds. What about you?
Yeah, I was shocked by how quiet of an episode this thing was. I mean, I was expecting in grand Marvel fashion a lot of pew pew pew, laser blasts, big fight.
Mhm.
And like you said, most of this is Loki and Sylvie talking to this guy. It's never actually outright said that he's Kang the Conqueror, although he does say that at one point he's gone by many names. Some people call him a conqueror, which plus we know that actor is playing Kang the Conqueror in is it Ant-Man 3, Quantumania?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we sort of, excuse me, occasionally the episode cuts away to Mobius sort of having a conversation with Ravonna and all of that. Oh my God. But most of it is just this conversation between Loki, Sylvie, and who we eventually learn is Kang. And it is, as you said, it's very, very character driven because we start learning about Kang, and I really appreciated the way Jonathan Majors played the role because it was very kind of playful.
Mhm.
Like he didn't feel that he was in any danger from these two. It was very playful just in the way that he spoke, the way he told his own story. It was kind of funny. But of course, Loki and Sylvie are constantly thinking he's just lying, he's manipulating them. And then, of course, they sort of get into it because she still wants to kill this guy. Loki is pleading with her to just take a minute to think about it because killing Kang could potentially be a huge deal, which essentially it is, because, of course, at the end of the episode, she does kill Kang. Is it she who teleports Loki back to the TVA? I think so, right?
Yeah, she's his little whatever it's called, his little ring of power, and opens up that portal and fucks him off into another dimension.
Right. And then she does kill Kang. She stabs him in the stomach, and then we see out the window. I should preface this: at the end of the previous episode, they saw that castle that was like inside of Eliath, the big cloud monster.
Mhm.
So that's where this whole sequence is taking place. And then we see out the window, we've seen at the TVA, they've got that that TV that shows like the time with any kind of branches or variant, whatever. We see that in reality, and it's branching off like crazy.
Mhm.
And of course, then Loki gets back to the TVA. And I loved this little twist because I did not see this coming, and I thought it was wonderful. Loki gets back to the TVA, and Mobius having how did he get the better of Ravonna? Do you remember?
He didn't. What do you
Right.
mean he got the better of her?
That's right. No. He
He-
attacked
he-
her. She kicked his
yeah,
ass.
he didn't really. He just came back. So he was what's it called? Pruned a couple episodes back. You know, he went to the void. Then he was brought back thanks to Sylvie because she brought one of those little communicator things. So he got a portal. So he surprised her essentially by like walking up into her office and being like, "Look, motherfucker, I came back from the void." So there was that. So he did surprise her in that regard. And they kind of have a back and forth, essentially Mobius being like, look, we were lied to, we're all variants. He was telling her the truth, like, we're all variants. The timekeepers were a lie. Why are you doing this? And she's just kind of, understandably to an extent, is just kind of like, this is all I know, fuck. So like she's just kind of like clinging on to it. She believes that like having some sort of order, even if it's based on a lie, is better than just like chaos, even if it's the truth.
Oh, and that's right. She leaves of her own accord. She opens a portal.
Yeah, exactly.
Says, I'm going off in search of free will or what have you. That's right.
Yeah, he tries to get her, and then she just like, yeah, it's just like karates him to the ground.
Right.
And then
as you do.
Yeah. And so then she's just kind of like, look, she's gonna go on her own little adventure that, you know, will be discovered in season 2, I suppose.
Right. So then, you know, towards the end of the episode, Loki gets transported back to the TVA or some version of the TVA. It almost had a I think it's a Ray Bradbury story, A Sound of Thunder. Are you familiar with it?
Is that the time travel one, the kind of like where they step on a butterfly and shit?
Yeah, it's like the butterfly effect. So that comes into play here because Loki gets back to the TVA and he runs into, I believe it's Hunter B-15 and Mobius, and he's saying, look, blah blah, this happened, Kang, blah, blah, blah. And then Mobius is just like, okay, you're an analyst, right? What's your name? And we realize, okay, this is a different version of this reality where Mobius doesn't know Loki. He doesn't recognize Loki. And I believe is the final shot of the episode. Loki looks off. They're in the library where there were the statues of the timekeepers. And now it's just a statue of Kang. Mm-hmm. And then we cut to credits. Did you see that coming? What did you think of that ending?
No, I liked it. It's a very Planet of the Apes. That was the first thing that came to my mind. But that was the most surprising thing is that I felt like this was going to be like, I didn't think that this was going to get a season 2. I hope that it did because I could see the potential for it. I thought this was going to be another one and done like WandaVision and maybe like Falcon and Winter Soldier. I don't know what they're going to do with that, but yeah, I was expecting this to kind of wrap up more neatly, like kind of tease Kang the Conqueror, but then like they kind of get out of there or whatever the fuck. And then like, it's just kind of like, oh, he'll be back. But they're really like just a full-on cliffhanger, everything. Like, you know, Sylvie killing Kang or that version of him, I forget what his name is, and just opening up the multiverse and just everything is kind of collapsing in on itself. And the fact that Loki was sent back not to the right dimension. He's in his own, he's stuck in an alternate dimension where Mobius doesn't even fucking know who he is now. And so it's like, it's a lot of setup, admittedly. It's a lot of setup, and I can see that being kind of frustrating for some people. But I found it really engaging, like the entire time, even though it was mostly exposition this episode. I was like, and then what happened? Like I was eating it up. I was like, okay, this is finally coming into picture. And I think it was a great mixture of answering a lot of the questions that we have while also introducing these new scenarios and new questions. So yeah, I was surprised by seeing Kang's statue in the TVA. And it really just was, it got me so hyped for the future of the MCU. Honestly, like it got me hyped for Spider-Man 3 or No Way Home, because that seems like it's going to be, you know, using a lot about the multiverse and stuff. Then Doctor Strange is going to reportedly have both Elizabeth Olsen and Tom Hiddleston. So it's going to be like Doctor Strange, Wanda, Loki. It's going to be crazy. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. I will say, like, when it cut to credits, I remember thinking, like, you're ending it there? Are you fucking kidding me? And I was like, there's got to be a post-credit sequence that gives us like some kind of context.
Yeah.
The fact that it said Loki will return in season 2, I was like, that's the way to go. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
And we should move on in a second, but I did want to point out that one thing that I thought was cool, which was sort of setting up the concept of the multiverse. This show, unlike the other 2 Marvel series that, you know, every episode just starts with the Marvel fanfare with that music, this show has changed up the music they always show the fanfare, but they've changed the music a couple of times.
Mhm.
And this one, they had no music. It was just overlapping lines of dialogue from various Marvel movies, Marvel shows, and then real life stuff. I mean, I caught Nelson Mandela talking at one point, Malala Yousafzai at one point talking, and then it even goes into like footage of like flying through space and all that. And I thought that was cool. I thought that was really setting up the multiverse, which of course we're really going to explore in Doctor Strange 2, the Multiverse of Madness, and presumably Quantum Mania and Spider-Man No Way Home. So that was cool. So yeah, overall, I quite liked Loki. I'm still trying to decide how I would rank it. I will say, of the 3 shows, Falcon Winter Soldier is going on the bottom. That's number 3. I think Loki was more consistent than WandaVision, and that WandaVision had the first couple episodes were fun, but they weren't as weird as I was hoping. And then I didn't love the conclusion. I think Loki was more consistent. I think overall, I still like WandaVision the best of the 3. What about you?
Yeah, I'm right there with you, where I think that Loki was much more consistent and overall more satisfying, but at the same time, WandaVision had me hooked. Like when we were, especially in the middle stretch of WandaVision, I was like, oh, every time it was like, tune in next week or whatever it said. I forget the tag, but every time WandaVision ended, I needed to know what happened next.
Yeah.
And Loki, I was still like, oh, I'm excited for next episode, but I didn't have that same sort of like, I don't know, that craving to unearth this mystery. But yeah, I agree with your sentiment. I think maybe WandaVision I liked more overall, but Loki was consistent all the way through.
Okay.
And I do just want to point out that I believe that there's 99-cent avocado. I think that's on sale. That's what Andris is informing me right now.
Also, you can get a ballpark beef franks, 3 for $10 at your local Jewel.
Oh my goodness!
I don't have a local Jewel. I'm Canadian.
Well, come over here, get some hot dogs.
I mean, yeah, so
at that price, how can I afford not to?
Yeah, just hop on a plane. You know, you fly over there, you get some hot dogs. At the end of the day, you're really saving. That's the biggest thing. You got to spend some to earn.
You got to spend money to make money.
Exactly. So you can't pass
delicious
up those deals.
dogs. Yeah. I will say this though. My biggest gripe with the Marvel output is the fact that they've done 3 shows this year. Each of them had like 8 episodes. And it's like, you keep pumping them out. It's what Disney does. They oversaturate their own market when they make these things. And it's like, you guys could have taken all that money and all that time, and you could have made one show with like 13 to 25 episodes, and it would have been better. And you just burned people out along the way, because you're like, fuck, another show? Jesus Christ. 3 in 1 year is insane.
I think in a way though, it was kind of not that necessarily this was planned because of COVID, but I think in a way it did give a lot of people like something to scratch that Marvel itch, because we haven't been going to the movies, and you know, eventually we got Black Widow, but you know, that was, I mean, previously to Black Widow, the last Marvel movie we got was 2 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So, sure, but like one show, Jesus Christ, 3 shows back to back practically. It's like, fuck.
I think if Disney Plus had a bigger output of more original content besides this, that would make sense. But since they're not, this is really all that kind of Disney Plus has. But not only that, like, to be fair, all 3 of these shows are vastly different from each other. Like, I think that if you were a layman and you were just to kind of like walk into these blind, I don't think you would think that these were all connected, because they don't share the same characters. They have different visual styles, different storylines, different tones. So I think that in a way I can see how it's like, yeah, there are 3 Marvel properties back to back to back, but I do appreciate that they're different enough that, like, you know, watching Falcon and Winter Soldier, I did not feel the same way as watching certain episodes of WandaVision or Loki.
But on the flip side, you feel obligated to watch them, because if you watch the movies, you're gonna miss something now. So it's like, oh fuck, I gotta keep, you know, that's what you know, it's like,
Yeah, I could see that being frustrating for some people. I think for me, I'm already kind of like into it. So it never felt like a chore. So far, it could potentially. I don't think that it's impossible for me to be like, oh Jesus, but none of these shows I felt like I really had to force myself to watch
Oh
them.
yeah.
So it was sort of like, well, if you personally missed these episodes, you're not going to understand the movies. I'm like, well, I'm going to watch them anyway, so it doesn't really bother me.
That's fair.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we should move on to Fear Street Part 3, 1666. This is, as I said, Part 3. It's the finale of this Netflix event series trilogy, which is loosely based on the works of R.L. Stine, his Fear Street novel series, which my understanding came before the Goosebumps series. I don't think these stories are stories directly from the book, kind of just sort of in a similar world, inspired by that world. And it's cool what Netflix did. They put out the first one a couple weeks ago on Friday. The second one came out the following Friday. The third one came out the following Friday. They presented them in reverse order. So it went, the first film took place in 94. The second film took place in 1978. The third film took place in 1666, which I said in my non-spoiler review that I got up on my channel earlier today. It's a little on the nose, 1666, but whatever. What are you going to do? It's not a big deal. But now, granted, Chris, you and I talked about the first film a couple weeks ago on the show.
Yeah.
We didn't do the second. So you guys both got caught up. I guess, Andris, you had to watch all three.
Yes.
So let me just, I guess, let me start with you, Andris. I'll ask you just sort of brief thoughts on 1 and 2. Then Chris will get your brief thoughts on 2, and then we'll start talking about 3.
Okay. I didn't hate him.
Okay.
That's becoming my catchphrase. I don't like that.
Yeah, for me, it's the biggest complaint is that I had with the first one is what kind of came over for most of the second one and third one, is that the editing. I found the editing to be quite bad, where it was just too quick. It really just felt like this was like a longer project, or maybe it was supposed to be like
A show?
3. Yeah, maybe it wasn't supposed to be 3 movies, but maybe like 6 episodes or something, or 7, where it's like they could have spent more time, but everything felt very truncated. And there were things that I liked about it. I mean, there were things that I liked about the second one quite a bit. I know we're mostly talking about 3, but I liked how the second one was like a major homage to Friday the 13th. Summer camp and the guy with the bag on the head, like Jason's look from part 2.
Yes.
So I enjoyed that. And there are things to like about this. Like there's some quite good cinematography, and it feels very, very much like a love letter to a lot of different kind of horror films. But a lot of it, the third one as well, just kind of feel hindered to me by the editing. It just feels very choppy, and it doesn't quite follow through with its swing. But I don't think it's bad by any means. I think that these are some fun kind of teenage geared towards horror film.
Well, and I will say the first half of part 3, and that's the fact that I'm talking about a half, not an act, is probably my biggest problem with part 3. And we'll get to that. But I found the first half of part 3 didn't have the editing problems that 1 and 2 had. And then the second half of part 3 totally did. Am I off base there? What do you think?
In what way?
Well, like the first 2 had a lot of very like frenetic, like jarring editing. And I didn't notice that in the first half of part 3. First half of part 3 felt like it was breathing a little bit better to me.
I can agree with that for sure. Yeah, the first one felt especially nonstop. Like it was just going. The second one, the editing still bothered me, but I agree. I think it kind of like lessened. In the first half, it still felt kind of rushed, but it didn't feel like, maybe it's because they also didn't have like wall to wall needle drops of like famous songs. So it helped feel like there were individual scenes in the third movie, as opposed to the first one, part 1, which just felt like one long montage of a movie. I'm like, holy shit, just take a breath. Yeah.
Okay, so the premise of this film, kind of the entire trilogy, is that back in the day in this town in the 17th century, there was this girl, Sarah Fear, who was hanged for being a witch. And so all of the horrible things that have happened in this town, Shadyside, over those 3 centuries are because of like basically her ghost manipulating people into becoming serial killers and blah, 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 blah. And so the characters from the first film, they're going to try and figure out how to end this curse. So this movie jumps back in time to 1666 in the area that would eventually become Shadyside. And it's a settlement called the Union, or just Union. And we meet Sarah Fear and we see what happened to her. But at the end of the first movie, or no, actually, I think it's at the end of the second movie. The second movie takes place in 78, but it's got a coda at the end that has the characters from the first movie getting in touch with the survivor of the second movie years later. It gets a little convoluted. Trying to figure out how to break this curse. So this main girl, Dina, is trying to save her girlfriend, also named Sam. We've been talking about Sam's a lot today. Because Sam has been like possessed by this witch, this demon. She's now this like feral creature, trying to figure out how to save her. So then in the third film, we jump back to 1666. We get Sarah Fear's story. However, she's played by the actress who plays Dina. I believe her name is Kiana Madera, which I thought was a cool concept. A lot of the characters in part 3 are played by various performers from the first 2 movies to sort of interconnect everything, which I thought was a cool idea.
I didn't like it.
No?
I thought it was distracting because I'm like, wait, why are they all? Because it's obviously Dina, the actress playing Dina. It's her head is in the world that we're seeing this story through. So I understood that, but like, I'm like, why is her little brother that little man now suddenly?
Right.
It was confusing, and the accents were not the best.
I thought a couple of them were not too bad, but some of them were not so good either.
Andres, I'm right there with you. Like even within the mythology of the films, it doesn't quite make sense, because they introduced it at the end of part 2, where it was essentially like they showed that she kind of went back in time. The main girl, Dina. I saw 3 movies with this chick, and I can't remember her name. So Dina, she was looking into the water. So although we were seeing Dina, it was clear that she was actually Sarah Fears. That made sense enough. I can go with that. We're seeing it from her perspective. But yeah, then they just pulled a Wizard of Oz, in the sense that all the characters from the beginning of the story, now they're just they're just here. But why? And also, this movie reminded me a lot of a few things. One, there's a movie of it, but it's a play, The Crucible. The movie had Winona Ryder and Daniel Day-Lewis. It's very much reminiscent of that. It also reminded me a lot of The Witch by Robert Eggers, but just not as good. It reminded me of it in the fact that The Witch felt very authentic. Like, it's like, did these fuckers go back in time and film like New England in the 1600s? Because it feels real. This movie, though, it felt like everyone just in modern times just kind of wearing period clothes. It felt like a Renaissance fair. Like all of them, a lot of them had bad accents, like Andres said, but a lot of the women as well were just wearing like normal makeup and stuff. They had like eyeliner, like winged eyelashes and shit. They all looked like made up. I'm like, what is this?
And then a bonnet.
Yeah. Is this a dream? Is this in her head? Or is it like Wizard of Oz, where she's seeing her buddies, but in actuality, it's not? I don't know. I don't understand.
Yeah, but the weird thing is, like, if it's in her head, but it's Sarah's memories, why wouldn't she see Sarah's memories as Sarah's memories?
You're right.
I felt bad for the actress who played the real Sarah Fear, because you're like, oh, there you are for 20 seconds. Oh,
yeah, you've got like the almost the main character that's controlling everything, and you had maybe a minute of screen time. Probably not even close to that much.
Like, there's your face. Goodbye. Here comes that terrible accent again.
Well, and I will say too, I said in the spoiler-free review that like the look of the episode, like for a period piece set in the 17th century, it didn't look good. It looked like they shot it on a local farm and then just desaturated the colors, and like it's olden days. Again, maybe they had a very limited budget. I don't know. I thought the costumes were pretty good. I thought the production design wasn't bad, but the actual look of the world, it just looked cheap to me.
Yeah, It's a shame too, because the second film, I think it worked in that it was like, it's a summer camp, so it wasn't a huge property that they were on. And in fact, they kept showing this map of like, here are where the cabins are and stuff, and it felt authentic.
Yeah.
And I know that it's like, making a summer camp seem authentic is easier than 1600s, but it felt like they kept the same principle of like, let's just make this as small as possible. It seemed like there was like 5 little huts
Yeah.
in this town.
It
And
was
then
it was hard to follow the characters as they're trying not to get killed by the village people once it goes all to hell. Like where they're like, she's a witch, get her, and then they're like, where is she going? Oh, is that a house? Who's this? All the fucking men look the same. I couldn't.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out. I'm like, wait, which long-haired guy is that?
Yeah, they all had dirty, dark, long hair in their faces.
There's the one guy who looked a little bit like Robert Pattinson, which I found very distracting.
Yes.
The drunk guy.
Yeah.
But I also found I haven't really particularly liked the dialogue in any of these movies.
Yes.
I thought it was at its worst in this one,
Mhm.
particularly the whole 1600s thing. Like Chris, you were saying how it looked like modern day people at a Renaissance fair. The dialogue felt the same. The dialogue felt very anachronistic. There were like, people would throw out sayings that people still say today. Do I know for a fact that people didn't say that in the 1700s or 17th
Yes,
century?
you do.
Do I? I don't know that I do.
You do.
It felt weird to me.
Yeah, there was weird, like.
Plus, when she was like, "Hey Siri," and I was like, "I'm pretty sure that's."
Yeah, she's like, "Wait a minute, I don't know if that's." She's like, "Man, you bugging." I'm like, "Did they say that in 1600s?" Anyway, yeah, they would throw in like certain lines where that would be like, "Oh yeah, we're trying to make this seem like it's like this, like the 1600s, like ye old witch." I don't know, just like that. I don't know if that was ye old witch.
That was my favorite scene in the film.
Yeah, the ye old witch scene. But then they would just also be like, I don't know, man. I don't know how to explain it. Just like the way they were talking to each other, like, we got some berries. Let's do it, motherfucker.
Let's go have a fucking forest rave.
It felt like they just like gave up at some point. There's like, fuck it, just write dialogue like we know how to. I don't want to go do like a Google thesaurus to make it inaccurate, like to make it fit the time period.
Right.
Biggest problem part 1 had, it was 2 times longer than it should have been. That story could have been told in 20 minutes and it wouldn't have felt rushed.
Well, this is the thing. Sorry, I'll just interject and then you please go on. I thought all 3 of the movies had the same problem. They build to what feels like it's the big climax.
Yeah.
And there's still 20 minutes to an hour left to go.
Yeah.
Yes.
Every single one of them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, please go on. You were saying.
Yeah, no, I agree entirely, because it's just like, I remember we watched it together, me and the lady, and like it was like, all right, this is almost done, right? And then we'd check, it was like an hour left, and it was like, how the fuck, what is about to happen? Oh, we're going back to 1994. It's just, they should have cut it down. It does touch on an overarching problem I think this series has, which is, as films, they're very not self-contained.
Right.
You don't feel like you're like, oh, I'm gonna finish watching this one, then I'll be done for a while. It's like they don't feel self-contained. They don't feel you don't get closure. So it's this weird, like, it's kind of like a show, but it's 3 movies, but it doesn't know what it wants to be. And I think that, as Chris was saying, it hurts the presentation, because it's like, you're getting less time to do things by doing it as films, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I really don't know why they didn't just make this a miniseries. Like,
Yeah.
I know that you were saying that the first movie was too long. I think that feeling would have been mitigated if they were like truncated into episodes.
Yes.
And it would have like given more time to breathe, where it's like, yeah, you have a couple episodes in the 90s, then a couple episodes in the 70s, maybe an episode or 2 in the what's it called?
1666.
Yeah, and then you can have the finale back in the 90s, and then it wouldn't feel like this weird, I don't know, like this movie feels like it's 2 movies that are very disjointed, and they don't quite feel the same. And it also felt weird that although the second one also had the framing device of like, it started in the 90s, then they did a flashback to the 70s, and then it ended in the 90s, that still at least felt like it had a story in the 70s, if that makes sense. It still felt like here are new characters. We're primarily focused on 1978. In this one, part 3, it really felt like 1666, like they couldn't wait to fucking get out of there. And then and then it was like back to the, and so if you're not going to spend that much time in this time period, don't make it, you know?
Well, and so that actually perfectly brings me to my biggest issue with this movie. I've said in the other review, like I'm fascinated by like puritanical culture and witch trials and all that kind of stuff. So even seeing the original trailer for all 3, I was like, okay, that third one, that's the one that I'm like really psyched to see.
Yeah.
And I did think there were some cool things about it, but we get to the point where they're about to hang Sarah Fear, which, the whole story is based on that act. And they're getting ready to string her up. And I look at how much time is left, and there's an hour left to go.
That's what happened here. We're just like, what?
Right. So, and I was like, how do they? And then I thought, okay, I think I know what they're going to do. And it's exactly what they did. They hang her, and then it cuts back to 1994. Like, not even like it's Fear Street 1994 part 2. Literally, they put that title card on the screen. I think it was a missed opportunity that should have gone Fear Street part 1, part 2. That would have been way funnier to me, but whatever. So then they just jump back, and it was so jarring to me. Like, it completely took me out of the movie. And I was kind of just like, clocking time until it was over after that. How did you guys feel about that?
I will say, as frustrated as I was by the events of the first half of the second or third film, I was happy with how things played out ultimately, because I kept asking my girlfriend, I was like, what the fuck are the rules for this series? I don't understand what's happening. And then that big, shocking bombshell of, oh, it's not the witch, it's fucking the good man. Good is evil.
Nick Good. Okay. So yeah, we talked about that the dialogue is bad. So in the 1600s, and I want to point out Ashley Zuckerman, who plays in the 1600s, he's Solomon Good. And then, of course, in the 1994, he's Sheriff Nick Good, who is like his great-great-grandson, plays both roles. I really liked him in the 1600s part. I thought he was the best part of that movie, if you will.
Yeah.
And then I hated him in the 94 thing. Just the way his character was written, I didn't like him.
Yeah.
But that reveal we get towards the end of the 1600s part, that it was him the whole time, not the witch. I thought that was cool. I didn't see that coming.
I didn't either. I was just like, oh shit, okay.
Yeah, because I mean, it's. I won't rag on it. I was gonna say it's easy to kind of be misdirected when I'm not too invested in the story, but sure. I'll admit that they did it well in that everything was building up to Sarah Fears. So they didn't really give a reason for me to kind of question it. So I appreciated that. And I think that's, again, it's kind of emblematic of the entire series, is that there are things that I quite like about it. There's some cool kills. When there's some cool horror imagery to an extent, like when they were still in the 1600s and the guy went into the church. Yes. And there was like that preacher with like his eyes gouged out, a bunch of dead kids in pews with their eyes gouged out. I'm like, that's a creepy image. I dig that.
The black pig that ate all of its own piglets, like
it's like what? It tastes like bacon. Okay, that was a dumb joke. Don't even laugh. Anyway, no,
too late. I already
laughed. So there are things that I liked about it. But it overall it just kind of felt weird and disjointed, and it just felt kind of rushed in a lot of parts. And I really do think that if this was just like a series that was dropped, maybe had 7, 8 episodes. 6, 7, 8 episodes and released around Halloween, I probably would have liked it a lot more.
Perfect. Oh yeah.
Like,
I probably would have liked it more.
Like 8 30-minute episodes.
Yeah. Just enough where it's like you don't need to stretch the story out that much more, but just let individual scenes breathe a bit more, especially in the beginning. And I think it would have been like, I would have been into it. And then again, I wouldn't have minded if one episode was in the 1600s and then the finale was back in the 90s. It wouldn't feel like this weird one movie that's just fighting with itself.
Yeah, just to go from one to the other was just so incredibly like jarring. It was I do, just to circle back a little bit, because we were talking about the dialogue and we talked about Solomon Good and Nick Good. Of course, it's Goode, whatever. As soon as we get back to the 94, Dina kind of like wakes up from her reverie and now she knows everything. She says to her brother, she's like, "Oh, good is evil." And I had to pause it because I burst out laughing.
So did we.
It's amazing.
And I
It was
actually,
so terrible.
just for you guys watching, we have like a group chat on Facebook, whatever. And I didn't want to spoil anything for them because I didn't know if they'd watched it yet. So I was like, just remind me to mention when we're doing the podcast. I'm just going to put an acronym just so I'll know what I meant. So I put GIE, and Andris knew immediately what I was talking about.
I did. It was silly.
That was the worst line in the entire trilogy. That was brutal.
But it was delivered so memorably well.
Did they think it was clever? Because
I bet they did.
That's why it kind of reminded me. I mean, there's a lot of it that reminded me of what's it called, The Crucible. But one of the things in The Crucible is that there was a term, and this is historically accurate, given to certain people, called like Goody. Like Goody Proctor is one of the characters' names. And I feel like they were trying to do that. We're like, well, we can't call people Goody because that would make it too much like the Crucible. We can't be like, Goody Sarah, this is Goody Jonathan, and this is Goody. So we're just going to call him Good, but Goode. And it's like, it's still on the nose, and it's not really clever because it doesn't really make sense. You're not making, I don't know. It was silly.
I should point out, I could be wrong, but I think in the 1600s part, I think there was a character named Goody.
Oh, there might have been.
In fact, I think Dina, Sarah, whatever, when she's with her other friend who she's in love with, and the mom comes in, I think she says, "Goody Miller" or whatever, "Don't kick me out," or
you're
pretty
probably
sure
right.
that happened.
You're probably right. I was a little bit like checked out watching this. I was paying attention. I wasn't distracted. I was just kind of like, okay, but this is getting great reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, which is odd to me. I normally don't disagree with the kind of consensus, and so I'm surprised by how this is like. I don't know if it's just pulling from a small portion of critics, but like all three of these are getting like high 80s to low 90s percentile. And I'm like, they're not bad, but they're really not anything to write home about.
Yeah.
Right. Well, but as you guys know, all movie critics take payola, right? So
of course.
Oh, clearly. Yeah.
How do you think I got this new apartment?
Right.
Exactly.
That sweet Disney money. Yeah, so okay, so we get back to the 90s, and okay, here's they meet up with Gillian Bell, who is the grown-up version of Sadie Sink's character from the second film, who survived the massacre or whatever. And they come up with this plan to kill all the serial killers and Nick Good. And then so there's this character who has been shown briefly throughout the trilogy.
The janitor?
Like the janitor guy from the mall.
Yeah.
And he's like, he's like probably like a mid-20s black dude that the sheriff always has a problem with. He's always arresting him for like, I think, smoking pot or whatever it is. And like the kids go up to him, they're like, "Hey, you want to help us murder the sheriff?" And he's like, "I'll get my coat." And I was like, "What?
Yes.
What?
Bet
Like,
your ass I do."
I understand you have
issues.
a shitty relationship with this, but like no second to think like, do I want to murder the town's sheriff in cold blood? Let's go.
Yeah.
Not even asking why.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
All right, I'll get my things.
I've been waiting for an excuse. Just thank you. My whole life has been leading up to this.
That was like shocking to me. Not
was
shocking as like, how could they have gone there? Like, how did they think that was going to work and play? Like, I don't know.
That's funny.
And then they played the guy kind of as more of like a coward in the rest of the thing. But so they get to this mall, and the plan is, because he's the janitor, he knows how to work, all the sort of the grates that come down to lock the stores at night. So the plan is they're going to get the blood of, I think, Dina, because she's been marked by Seraph or something. I don't know, whatever. And they're going to paint it, because the serial killers are all attracted to the blood, and anyone who has the blood on them, they have to kill or something. So they're going to trap the serial killers in the stores with the grates, and then they're going to bring in the sheriff and then sick them all on the sheriff, and then he'll die, and then hopefully everything will be fine. Okay, fine. That whole sequence to me felt like the unholy union of Stranger Things and Home Alone.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's exact. I said in the mall sequence, I turned to my girlfriend. I was like, "This is the season finale of Stranger Things season 3.
Yeah,
This is the
absolutely.
Star Court Mall all
Yeah.
over again."
Yep. But then they're like rolling out the pages of plans like Kevin McAllister, and it's all
Yeah.
like booby traps and whatever.
I enjoy a good Home Alone bit, and I like when people make little traps and stuff.
Sure.
But so it's fine. But yeah, it definitely was like, was this just? I know this is Netflix as well. Did they just like, well, we have a set of a mall. We could just like upgrade it from like the mid 80s to the early 90s, and no one will notice. So fuck it, let's just shoot it there.
And I mean, let's keep in mind Sadie Sinks in this movie.
Yeah, it's
from
all
Stranger
connected.
Things. Maya Hawke, also Stranger Things season 3.
Yeah.
The first
Yeah.
one. So there is that. One question for you guys that maybe I missed something. I understand the painting of the blood and blah blah blah. Why all the black lights and neon paint? Was that explained, or did that just look cool? Like, what was the point of that?
I think it was just visual.
Yeah, it was just a visual.
I
But,
don't
like-
remember there being like an explanation of like, we need to use blacklight for this reason. I think it was just
So they
there.
literally, like, on the eve of trying to kill the sheriff and trying to end this curse, they took like 3 hours to like graffiti the shit out of a fucking mall and set up black lights and then turn off the lights just for
No,
visual effect. Like,
I agree. I'm like, I'm right there with you. Where if was there a line that explained what the hell they were doing with that? I think it was just like, it was like that moment in The Dark Knight Rises when he comes back to save Gordon, and he's like, light it up, and he lights it up, and there's just like a burning bat symbol on the bridge, and I'm like, motherfucker, you didn't need to do that. You could have just been like, hey Gordon, I'm back. It doesn't make sense.
but there is like a story reason for that in that movie. Whether or not you buy it is another thing. But him doing that, the fire on the bridge, was to galvanize everybody else to say, I'm back now. You guys have to come fight. That's how Matthew Modine's character decided to get back in his dress blues and come fight. Like, at least there was a story reason there, even though it wasn't said outright, it's implied.
Mhm.
Here, if there was a story reason, I missed it completely.
Yeah, I missed it too. I don't know.
I have a possible explanation.
Let's hear it.
I think it's twofold. One fold, is that a phrase? I don't know. Anyway,
It is now.
it is now. So one of it is maybe it's threefold even. We'll find out.
Oh my goodness.
So one is they were using the or not the black light, but they were just graffitiing the shit out of it to get the cops' attention.
Okay.
Hey, there's a crime in progress. I gotta,
But he would have to be in the mall to see it.
Well, they defaced the outside of it as well.
Okay, that's
Okay.
true. That's true. That's fair.
Two, probably to make sure they know which storefronts they were going to use to lock the monsters in so they would be able to corral them.
Okay.
And three, because it looked interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
If there was a moment of like, I don't remember if there was a moment of like a police officer, like if they were trying to specifically get his attention, was there a moment of a police officer driving like doo doo doo, and he does like the double take, like and he sees like it like graffitied?
There was something. They stole his cop car.
But that
Yeah,
doesn't
but
explain the graffiti.
Yeah,
Oh.
if you steal a cop car, the cop's going to come after you. You don't need to spend time graffitiing. Just steal the cop car.
Well, they had time to kill, and they said, let's
guess.
spruce the place up.
We have way too much fluorescent spray paint. We need to do something with it.
It's gonna make the final battle look cool. God.
Yeah.
And then,
I-
go ahead.
I will say I was slightly disappointed that their plan didn't work out, because I thought Sheriff Good getting murdered by multiple serial killer reanimated ghost ghoul things
That
were
he
coming
had
out
a
of
hand in.
yeah, that would have been such a more like, ooh, that's very poetic, and like maybe like the ghost of Sarah Fear could have shown up out of the tree. Why did they keep the fucking hanging tree in that mall? That's insane. That's
Yeah,
a
like they-
haunted fucking
They built the mall around a tree.
yeah.
Like, yeah, nobody would do that. I know it's a dumb fantasy thing.
I
That's
know.
like, but no, I'm right there with you. It's like, it's a dumb fantasy thing, but even in that excuse, it's like, no one's like, oh, you know what we did in this tree? Fucking hanged a bunch of people. Let's
Yeah.
memorialize it. Like, no, you're burying that shit. You're like,
The-
let's,
The Hanging Tree Mall of America.
yeah, okay, trust me. There's a million trees that have been used to lynch people, and it's awful, but it's a fact. And nowhere has anybody been like, let's fucking like
Put a
section
plaque
this
on
off.
that tree.
Yeah, there's not
Yeah.
even a. Oh my god.
But yeah, what else was I gonna say? It was cool
Well,
though.
I was gonna say actually to your point, Andres, like the whole
Yes.
if Good had been killed by the serial killers, like that would have been. I don't think you watched Game of Thrones. I can't remember, but that would have been like Ramsay Bolton being killed by his dogs, which was like one of the most satisfying deaths on that show. Why didn't they go in that direction with this movie?
I don't know. They wanted to fake us out for 20 more minutes, and I mean, it's not like Sarah Fear's ghost couldn't travel through, up. I mean, I thought it was cool though in the basement that there was that giant Lovecraftian heart that was pumping out people. That was a really cool, awesome visual. But yeah, I don't know why they decided to divert it for like another 15 and have him go down there and all that shit, because I honestly feel like watching him getting torn apart by 5 supernatural slashers would have been awesome.
Well, and then also like for me, when they like sprayed the blood on the serial killers and then they all went head to head with each other, like I found like the guy in the skull mask and the thing, and they were all just fighting each other. Like I found that so goofy. I was like, just kind of sitting there like,
yeah, I know it was silly as all hell.
It was silly. I didn't find that part fun. I was just like, oh my god, this is so
schlocky.
dumb.
Yeah, I mean, it goes into what I said for the first one is that one of the things about the mythology, even if it doesn't quite make sense, that I like is that it wasn't just one slasher. It didn't come back as like, here's one slasher. They had a bunch of them. They had Baghead, they had 60s lady. I don't know who she is, but it's like, I like that aspect of it.
It was heavily reminiscent of 13 Ghosts, but this was better than 13 Ghosts.
Okay.
That is true. One thing I will say about that movie, I like the makeup effects on the ghosts.
Oh yeah.
Like if you just look at the production stills, you're like, that's cool with like the shards in the guy's face.
Oh
that
yeah.
That movie is awful though.
Yes.
I've not seen it. So yeah, I mean, yeah, at the end, she kills the cop, and the serial killers disappear, and everybody's happy, and that's the trilogy.
Yeah, so that's the trilogy, but it also left it kind of open-ended of like,
yeah.
Oh, that's right. Because
Stupid as hell.
There's gonna be more. And I don't know. Again,
that's right, because we see like the Book of Incantation sitting there at the crime scene, and we see some hands like grab it, and that's like
yeah. I'm not really jonesing for anymore, but I'm not like angrily against it.
Oh no.
Go ahead.
That last sequence, it's like, all right, who's getting fucking fired for not securing the evidence? Like nobody leaves a book in a crime scene like that. That's significant evidence.
Well, and if there was, like, there would be guards.
Yeah. They would just leave it like that. That's ridiculous.
I feel like this series was just a situation of like diminishing returns, because like if I'm ranking it, I'm literally gonna go 1, 2, 3. I thought 1 was the best. I had the most fun with it. Second one was good. The third one, like, I was pretty frustrated by this third one. I didn't hate it, to borrow your phrase there, Andres. I didn't hate this film, but
I didn't hate it.
It was certainly my least favorite of the 3. I was more bored in this one. I was more off-put. I had some eye rolls. Good as evil.
For me, the fact that it finally explained what was actually happening was just the giant redeeming point for 3 for me. Because otherwise I'm like, missed opportunities, things shouldn't have been happening, but it gives you the necessary puzzle piece to make the picture complete.
Right.
While the first one, Andres, you weren't here for the discussion, but I went on and on about the editing. I thought that the first one was so rushed. But that being said, it still had the storyline, and it still had the characters that I felt the most invested for. Yeah. Even in the second one, which I didn't dislike the second one. There was fun elements, again, the nostalgia bits, because I'm a big fan of the Friday the 13th films.
Hell yeah.
Not that they're great, but there's a bit of nostalgia for them.
Sir, they are great.
Okay, my apologies. All of them perfect, flawless.
Except the one from 2009. We don't talk about that one.
Nobody does. But what was I going to say? That even though I liked elements of the second one, I I still didn't feel invested to the camp characters, and I certainly didn't feel invested to like any of the weird alternate versions of the people in 1600s.
Yeah.
So in a weird way, although it felt jarring, I was kind of like you, Andres. I was kind of like when it did jump back to 1999 at the end of part 3. Oh, sorry, 1994 at the end of part 3. I was like,
in the
oh,
direct middle of part 3.
oh my god, it's the whole that sentence is a clusterfuck. But you know what I mean. It jumps back. So the second half of part 3, I was like, cool. Now we're getting a resolution to the story that started. Like, I'm actually interested in what happened. Are they going to save Sam? Is what's going to happen to these characters? Whereas everything else just felt like a weird little detour that I didn't need to go on.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I think that's pretty much the show right there.
Mhm.
I guess let me ask you guys this just quick. Andres, we'll start with you. Of this trilogy, how would you rank them?
I don't have a rank. It's too amorphous and weird, and things don't, there's no self-contained films, so I can't rate them as self-contained films because they're not. But I would say, hey, it was fun enough. If you don't want to watch Lord of the Rings in one day, watch this in one day, and then you'll kill 9 hours.
Okay. Chris?
I think I would go with you in that it's 1, 2, 3, but it's again also similar to Andres. It's weird because there are elements about the other 2 that I like more than part 1. I think the editing gets better and more palatable as the series goes on, but overall I was only really mostly invested in the characters and the story from the 1994 era. So yeah, I would go 1, 2, 3. And again, I think that if this is kind of like you're a teenager and this is kind of your introduction into horror or like more adult horror, I think this is a good gateway drug. This is a good gateway kind of like, going from maybe Goosebumps or whatever and not quite going into like, I don't know, Hostel.
Hellraiser.
Exactly. You're not quite going into Clive Barker territory. It's right in the middle where you're like 15, 16. I think this is a good kind of like, oh, I like this stuff. These movies that I like from 2021 are referencing older movies. Let me check them out. And they might check out Scream and they might check out Friday the 13th. So I do recommend them. I think that this does have a demographic, and maybe if I was a teenager, I would have liked it more. But like you, Andres, I think that we've seen enough horror movies that this is just kind of like we could see all the references that it's pulling from.
Yeah.
And I can appreciate it, but as a whole, it's like I don't need this necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, so as I said, that is the show. So Chris and I will be back next week. No idea what we're going to be talking about off the top of my head as of yet, but
is the Jungle Cruise coming out next? No, or is it the week after?
I'm not sure. I got invited to a screening of that.
Oh, lucky you!
Fancy over here.
Is it still 2 hours and 45 minutes or whatever?
Really hope not.
Do you remember we looked that up and we didn't know if it was official, but it was like 160 minutes or something. Let me see. I gotta look it up on air. We have to look it up. Oh no! It says right now 2 hours and 7 minutes. So
it's better.
That's better. Seriously, I thought it's better. It's better than fucking an extra 40 minutes on top of that. Anyway,
I'm still a little bit. I'm not sure if I'm ready to go back to the theater just yet.
I feel
and it's all the way downtown, which means I gotta get on the subway. So I don't know if I'm gonna go.
Gotta use your legs.
And let's be honest, it's not. Nobody's really that excied for this.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
I don't know. We'll see.
We'll figure it out. We'll see.
We'll see what we're going to be talking about next week. But before we go, Chris, where can people follow you online?
Instagram. My Instagram handle is Art of Light and Shadow. It's a fun kind of just daily blog about cinema, from wacky pop culture stuff like we talked about today to more artsy fartsy pretentious bullshit. Right now I'm doing a fun thing of just kind of like my favorite films per year. So starting from the 2000s going upward. Tomorrow's gonna be today is gonna be 2006.
Ooh.
So what went on my ranking? I don't know how to advertise myself yet. I'm still working on it. Anyway, Art of Light and Shadow. Check it out.
Andres?
If you do a YouTube search for Cheap Thrills Unspeakable Terror, you will find my reviews. I do low budget sci-fi and horror from the dawn of cinema to the modern era.
And you guys can always follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Courtshake. Obviously, you're already on my YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed, I sure would love you for it. And of course, want to encourage you guys to give this video a thumbs up, give it a share if you enjoyed it, because it does help it get out there. It helps the channel grow. We all appreciate that very much. And of course, if you have any thoughts on Fear Street or Loki, or what was the first thing we talked about? Gunpowder Milkshake.
Gunpowder Milkshake.
Hit the comments. Let us know what you think. I will give it a read. I will respond when I can. So don't think it's going unread. Again, we want to remind you that you can get audio only versions of this podcast on places like Google Podcasts, Spotify. We're hoping for Apple Podcasts and Stitcher coming soon. I really got to figure out what's going on with that. And finally, things keep changing, but it does feel like the world is starting to get there with this whole thing. I don't even want to say it. I don't want to say its name. I'm so tired of it. But we do hope that all of you watching, and all of you who aren't, we hope that you're healthy. We hope that you're safe. And we want to thank you guys again for watching. And we will see you next week. Thanks for watching. Take care, everybody.
All right. Stay safe. Later.
Until next time.
Mass Media Hysteria.